Welcome to Effective Bible Teaching Session number 4. In this session, we're going to look in more depth at creating the teaching aim or the goal indicator statements. But before we talk about that, I would like to give just a general overview of the construction of the lesson plan and its importance and what we're really trying to accomplish with that. We'll do that by looking first at this example, this cartoon. We have the task of bridging this gap here between what we know about how a person learns and what actually happens in the classroom. Just because we know that learning is a change in skill or attitude or knowledge or understanding does not mean that that actually occurs in the classroom. In fact, I'm sure you would agree that many times what happens in the classroom is not even planned or what we're trying to really accomplish. So we have to figure out how to bridge this gap, and that is called a lesson plan. The lesson plan is what actually allows us to take what we know about our content, about our concepts we're trying to teach, about how a learner learns, and accomplish learning in the classroom according to what we want to see happen, according to that plan. So in order for that to happen, we have to build that bridge. And the bridge is made up of 3 pillars. Okay, and the first pillar is goals, the second pillar is activities, and the third are tests. So the goals are, just as it states, is what are we trying to accomplish? What changes do we want to see occur in the learner in the time that we have with them? The activities are the things that we do with the student or the students in the classroom to help accomplish those goals. So those are the things that we actually engage in. It could be any number of, there's a million different things we could do with students in our classrooms, and we need to choose the right combination of those activities to help accomplish the goal so learning takes place. And then the tests are our way of verifying that the change that took place inside of the learner is demonstrated so I can see that it actually did occur. So for instance, if my goal is for a student to be able to recall the books of the Bible from memory, then I will do several activities that will help them memorize the books of the Bible, and then my test will be what? Having them recite the books of the Bible from memory to make sure that the learning took place. Very simple. So we're going to use this pattern, goals, activities, tests, as we build our lesson plan. So we have to begin with our goals. And that's where we will begin today. So in your text, Richards and Redfield call the goal your lesson aim, what you're trying to accomplish, the target, what you're aiming at with your lesson. And they give 4 characteristics of teaching aims. First, it should be short enough to be remembered, clear enough to be meaningful, specific enough to be achieved, and written in terms of the student. And then they give some examples. They do give a template, which I'm glad they did that, because I think having this template helps. Although I'll be showing you a slightly different template from Ford's materials, which we will use in this class. But I'm going to go through this briefly just because it's in the text and I want to make sure you do understand it. Students will, and then they put in a learning verb there, what they're going to do. Whatever they're going to do to the concept, right? Learning concept they're learning about, by, and then you put in the learning response. So let's give an example, and then I'm going to talk about these examples. The first example I do not like. It's not a good example. It's in the text, and I want to tell you why I don't like it. Let me go to the second example first. That's the second one that's given on page 144 in your text. Students will commit themselves to the practice of encouraging one another in times of persecution and difficulty by agreeing to meet together for prayer before school twice each week. Now, this is a decent goal, decent teaching aim. And the reason why, it uses here, students will commit themselves. Now, committing themselves implies that there's some kind of change inside. In this case, it's an affective change. That they've changed, there's an attitude or value that's changed because they've committed themselves to this value. People don't commit themselves unless there's a change that's taken place. And so this is a good learning verb here. I'm committing myself, okay, to the practice of encouraging one another in times of persecution, affliction, and difficulty. Okay, so that is the content, the learning concept. encouraging one another in times of difficulty. Okay, great. So I'm going to commit myself to that concept or that idea or that practice, whatever it is, by, and now what's here in orange is really a test. It's really, how am I going to demonstrate, how is the student going to demonstrate that commitment? Well, one way they would demonstrate it was by agreeing to meet together for prayer before school twice each week. So that would be a very, probably pretty good gauge to see if your teaching lesson has helped that student to form some kind of commitment to the practice of encouraging one another in times of persecution difficulty. So, now this is not a perfect statement. I'll show you one that's even better than this, but this is decent. Now the first one I do not like, and again it's in your text, and I'm going to highlight it because I want you to see the nuance, difference, and problems with this statement. Students will discover the three primary life implications that grew out of the priestly work of Christ by doing an inductive study of Hebrews 10:19-25. Okay, now that was the example they used early on with the inductive Bible study and in the earlier chapters. Now the problem with this is that the word discover does not necessarily tell me that it's not a word that indicates change has taken place. And in addition to that, doing an inductive Bible study in Hebrews doesn't really show that they've learned it. Just because I'm doing an inductive study does not show that I've discovered and understand and know the three primary life implications that grow out of the priestly work of Christ. So this is more process. Discovery is process. Doing an inductive Bible study is process. These are how I've learned. This is how I'm going to get it. But it doesn't show me, it doesn't describe the end state of having learned, of having understood, of having known, of having a change in attitude, of having committed. And the doing an inductive Bible study does not show, is not a test for did I learn, did I understand. Now, the second one here does. Agreeing to meet together for prayer Bible study, if it's voluntary, if something I do willingly, then that would very much show this goal achieved of being committed to this idea. But this, doing an inductive Bible study, does not show that I have somehow arrived at knowledge or understanding. So I don't like this at all. And it's very fuzzy. And so this is one reason why I'm deviating from your text. And I'm going to show you from the materials I'm going to give you, and that you've already read from Ford's material, that we're going to use a goal indicator, which is much more concise, it's much more robust, and I think it's a better way to go when we're talking about teaching aims. So let's go into that right now. So first we're going to talk about Ford's goal. Now Ford describes a goal, and then he also describes indicators. Okay, so the goal is a relatively broad statement. It is from the learner's viewpoint, which is good. It's not from my viewpoint or the teacher's viewpoint. It's what the learner will do. It states the primary learning outcome, which is, in this case, knowledge, understanding, attitude, and skill. And just so you know, we're going to call, rather than levels of learning or a learning verb, we're going to call that the primary learning outcome, or we'll call it PLO for short. It's going to be knowledge, understanding, attitude, or skill, and I'll use those words. Now, later on, I can change understanding to be maybe comprehension or insight, but knowledge will be knowledge, or will demonstrate, recall, perhaps. Attitude would be maybe appreciation, but attitude or appreciation would be words we could use there. But for the most part, starting out, let's just stick to knowledge, understanding, attitude, and skill. Okay, and then it also states the subject in a chewable bite, which means that it has to be small enough for us to be able to tackle in the time that we have with the learner. Okay, so it can't be so big, but it's still a relatively broad statement. Okay, so we'll look at what that means here in a little bit. Okay, and now Ford also talks about an indicator. Now, an indicator is how we know that learning has occurred, right? How it's really our test. We can literally construct a test based on the indicator, because this is how they're going to show us that learning has occurred. So the question, and he says, here is, what will the learner do to prove the learning has taken place? Okay, so I have to make sure I have something that they're going to show me, demonstrate to me that learning has taken place. Okay, next, how well will, that should be will, the learner perform? How well will the learner perform? Third is, under what conditions will the learner perform? So whatever kind of conditions I want to give them under which they will perform to demonstrate the learning will take place. Okay, so they give us, Ford gives us then a formula that combines both of these into a single statement. The learner will demonstrate, now the wording here is very important, the learner will demonstrate whatever that primary learning outcome is, knowledge, understanding, attitude, or skill, of whatever our learning concept is, or for whatever learning concept is, by, and whatever the indicator is. Okay? So in the case of, say, attitude, you would say the learner will demonstrate an attitude, or a positive attitude for, or an appreciation for whatever that learning concept is, by, and then you'll say how will they demonstrate that attitude. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples here. So again, we go back to the template. The learner will demonstrate knowledge of the successions of the kings of Israel by naming each king chronologically from memory with no mistakes. Okay, so here we have, of course, the primary learning outcome is knowledge. Remember, knowledge is only recall of facts. Of the succession of the kings of Israel, so there's my learning concept that I'm trying to teach. And how are they going to demonstrate their knowledge of the succession of the kings of Israel? How is that going to be shown if learning has indeed occurred? How can they show it? Well, they could show it, here's one way, by naming each king chronologically from memory with no mistakes. So here I have exactly what they're going to do, and I have how well they're going to do it. No mistakes. And implied here is this, are there any special conditions that I give here? No, I'm not giving them anything. It's all coming from memory. So I'm not giving them a list of names to put in order. I'm not giving them a list to match of their names and dates. I am simply saying I want you from memory to name each king chronologically with no mistakes. So there's no special conditions I'm giving. It's all done from the learner. And you read that, what that means in Ford's materials. Okay, here's another one. The learner will demonstrate understanding of what learning means by defining learning in their own words. Okay, so this is not a knowledge primary learning outcome, this is understanding. The learner will demonstrate understanding of what learning means by defining learning in their own words. Does it seem familiar to you? It should, because last session you turned in exactly this. You demonstrated to me that you understand, that you have a comprehension at some level of what learning means, because you define learning in your own words. Remember, we said learning is a change of knowledge, understanding, attitude, and skill brought about by experience. And then I asked you to change those words out and put your own words in there. And you had to think about, well, what is change? What is knowledge? What's another word for understanding? And by putting your own words in there, you've shown me that you have a level of understanding, comprehension of what learning means. So this is a perfect example of a learning goal that after a particular time, you spend time in whatever kind of activities, that if you can reach this goal, that you've proven that learning has occurred. Okay, let's see another one. The learner will demonstrate a positive attitude toward the practice of encouraging one another in times of persecution and difficulty by doing such things as agreeing to meet together for prayer before school twice each week. Now this should look familiar as well, because we just talked about it from your text. But I have reframed or recast that particular learning goal using Ford's kind of formula here. The learner will demonstrate a positive attitude, or maybe a positive commitment toward Okay, and you could use either words. Will demonstrate a commitment toward or positive attitude, or whatever you want, whatever it is that you have, whatever word in there that describes a change in the affective domain toward the policy or toward the practice of encouraging one another. Now, I've added in here by doing such things as, and that's really, really important to add into any of your goal indicator statements that deal with the affective domain. Things having to do with attitudes and values, because they have to be voluntary. And if they don't agree to meet together for prayer before school twice each week, does that mean they still haven't got it? No. They might still have the attitude, but they might want to demonstrate that in a different way, in another way. So just know that we use by doing such things as, we put that in there, because this is a representative activity that they could be involved in if that commitment were real. Okay? If we dictate that they must agree together to go and pray before school each week, they might do it. And you could check it off your list saying, well, looks to me they've got the commitment. No. When it comes to attitudes and values, you cannot force them to do things to demonstrate they've got it. You just have to give them opportunities and allow them to voluntarily choose those opportunities. And so later on, when we get into teaching for the affective domain, you'll notice that by doing such things as will be added in here, and you'll give a representative sample of what an indicator could look like if that attitude were real in their life. Now, when it comes to understanding or knowledge, you don't have to do that. I want you to tell me in your own words what learning means. Tell me, and you tell me. And if you tell me correctly, then guess what? You've demonstrated understanding. If you tell me the chronological order of the kings of Israel from memory, and you do that for me when I ask you to, and you do it without any errors, well, then I know that you have that knowledge. But you cannot do that with attitude, with something that's affective. If I tell you to go meet for prayer before school twice each week, you could go do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a heart change. You might be doing it for all the wrong reasons. Okay? Let's look at one more. This is skill. Learner will demonstrate skill in playing arpeggios on the harp by playing 2 octave arpeggios in the keys of C, F, and G with 2 or fewer mistakes. Okay, so this is a very specific learning goal, and my objective here is to help the student change in their ability, in their skill in playing arpeggios on the harp. So we have the primary learning outcome of skill. Playing arpeggios on the harp is a learning concept. And how are they going to demonstrate that to me as the harp teacher? Well, by playing 2 octave arpeggios in the keys of C, F, and G with 2 or fewer mistakes. So again, this is now has the what they will do to demonstrate it and how well. In this case, I'm going to allow 2 or fewer mistakes. And if they do more than 2 mistakes, well, then I know they haven't quite demonstrated their level of skill that I'm looking for, so we'll keep working with them. Okay. So these are examples here of Ford's kind of template of the goal indicator statements, and we're going to use this kind of approach with our lesson plan. Okay. So let's keep going here. Learning activity number 2. You're going to create 5 of these goal indicator statements using the Ford format. Okay, this format here. One of those goal indicators, should use the primary learning outcome of knowledge. So the learner will demonstrate knowledge of blank, and make sure that whatever that concept is something that they don't have to understand, but they just have to know, be able to recall and remember. Okay, and then make sure that the indicator is a test for their ability to recall or remember whatever that content is. The second one of the goal indicators, should use the primary learning outcome of understanding. This is now going more into comprehension. How are they going to understand that thing? So the indicator would say the learner or the pupil or the student demonstrates understanding of, and whatever the concept is. The Pythagorean theorem, by calculating the hypotenuse of a given right triangle. Okay, so that's one way to demonstrate understanding. You give them a problem and they solve it using the formula. Boom, you know they have the understanding of how to use it. Okay. One of the goal indicator statements should use the primary learning outcome of attitude. So we just saw an example of that. The learner demonstrates an attitude of gratitude, or the learner demonstrates a positive appreciation for whatever, for tithing, by doing such things as committing themselves to tithing or whatever. So we want to use attitude there. And the last one we want to do is skill. Or actually, this is the fourth one. One of the goal indicators should use the appeal of skill, which we just did that. The learner will demonstrate the ability to play the piano, will demonstrate skill in juggling, whatever. And then you're going to create an indicator which will be able to test that. The fifth goal indicator may use the primary learning outcome of your choice. So you could choose one of those four for the fifth one. Use a different subject area for each goal that you write. So your first one of knowledge should use one subject area, and then understanding, just choose a different subject area. Okay, so don't try to use the same subject area for all four of them. Okay, it'll make it less confusing if you don't do that. And then make sure to include an indicator that measures the achievement of the goal. That's again at the end, the indicator by what? By playing 2-octave arpeggios, by doing such things as meeting together before school and praying, whatever it is. Okay, so make sure you have that indicator, and then I want you to email these to me by the end of the week. And by the end of the week, by the way, I mean by Sunday night, midnight. That's when they need to be in. So you have the weekend to work on these as well. Okay.